very quick introduction to the project and the different entities that are engaged in the project. Bibliotheca DAO, it's the entity that's one of the entities developing the Realms autonomous world. The governance is based upon the 8,000 Loot Realms NFTs that manage the treasury in the direction of the project. Together, we are building Realms, which is a world of fully on-chain games. It's a fantasy universe with community-driven lore that came out of the Big Bang, which was the Loot project. And it's a world designed to be expanded by creators, so there's always something new for players to do. And we're also built to be very interoperable with Loot projects and with Startnet projects, and increasingly other autonomous world projects. There are two key products in the product roadmap. So Eternum is our, prestige title, where 8,000 players or 8,000 realm lords participate in a real-time strategy game, military strategy, economic strategy. And then the second product in the pipeline is Eternum Adventurers, which is more of a creator studio. So this is where we supply the primitives and infrastructure for others to come along and build games and have access to players through a marketplace. And a lot of what we're talking about today kind of reflects back into Adventurers. So the mission of Bibliotheca DAO is to deploy an open, expandable, and eternal on-chain reality filled with really enjoyable games. And we are operating with sort of frontier tech. So using Startnet L2 and L3s to develop a fully on-chain game, integrating AI. And part of the job is also educating our ecosystem participants for doing something they've not done before. Everything we do is being built in the open, and everything we do is being built open source. And part of the process is broadcasting what we're doing out to other development entities, and also receiving ideas from others who are on similar or parallel missions. Which leads us today to what we want to introduce you to, which is the idea of the Realms autonomous world, and why we believe there are advantages to aligning our tech and our terminology to this concept. And it's a progression of what we've been building so far, which is our on-chain gaming world. So there's going to be three sections to this. So the first is a discussion of what autonomous worlds actually are, then a discussion of the tech that is best suited for developing an autonomous world, and then a discussion on what we've been sort of describing, I guess, as an ecosystem grant or a developer grant to turbocharge development in the autonomous world, the Realms autonomous world. So I'll to and fro with Loaf here. Loaf, do you want to say hello and pick up at this point?
Yeah, GM everybody. I apologize if I sound a little sleepy. Our first child was born about 6 weeks ago, so I'm running on minimal sleep. So yes.
Congratulations.
And
when you say our child, it's not your or mine child.
No, it's not. No, one day. This is our child.
We'd have an on-chain child.
Yeah, the Realms Autonomous World's our child. Yeah, so I think just worth recapping that, what we're talking about here, it's not a change in direction at all. It's more a crystallization of our thoughts into like a shared direction for these type of games. And from the very beginning, the idea for Realms, it's evolved in terms of like the gameplay and mechanics and whatnot. But the single driving idea was this purely on-chain expandable world that people can add to, and it's governed by the players. And that's, we've never strayed from that vision. It's just kind of evolved as the technology's evolved, and the processes to build these things has, because it really is like this. This is like, it's probably just how like the metaverse was kind of bastardized by a lot of like major companies over the past few years. I think our thesis is that autonomous worlds will be the biggest narrative in about 12 months. It hasn't quite diffused into regular crypto culture just yet, but the signal is very, very strong. And so we thought it was prudent to align around a similar terminology with the actors in this space that actually are driving the right messages. And we are good actors. This is exactly what we've been trying to do. So it only made sense to align around the same terminology, and push a shared meme with the other projects that are trying to do the same thing. And it'll give us more strength in the market going forward, when the day does come that there are some companies that are trying to squeeze this terminology in a bad way. So yeah. But yeah, you can go to the next slide. Yeah, so like autonomous worlds and what we've been trying to do, that it's really the same thing. The idea around this is that they are permissionless. It's a permissionless contract that anyone can expand upon. That might sound kind of abstract, but it's really, really rather simple. These things, in the background, act as a singular contract that are deployed onto a network, and Eternum is deployed within that world. But anyone can come along and actually deploy within that world. So in a sense, they actually are very, very similar to how a blockchain themselves operate. In a regular blockchain, in a blockchain environment, you deploy a contract onto it and it just runs forever. Now, autonomous worlds live within the blockchain, and they're kind of like a miniature blockchain within it. But they have kind of some kind of defined rules and structure within them. But ultimately, they're still open and expandable. But it's up to the players, and it's up to the kind of the client. The clients that interact with these worlds to decide on what part of the world they want to display.
So this was an illustration of that there are on-chain games and with the rules on the blockchain, and then there are projects which are trying to create a whole world that anyone can expand at any time, and that we're at that end of the scale. And on that journey, we were looking for how to describe what we were doing, and we were using expressions like these.
Yeah, they don't quite have the same ring to it. MMOCCG kind of was a meme. It's still kind of a funny meme, but yeah, it's never really going to get the same catch. Eternal Games is good, but also I don't think it's as vivid as like a world. So the terminology, I think the terminology is important. We run in a meme world these days, so memes are very powerful. Hyperstructure is still a very, very strong meme, and I think it still stands. I think it's like slightly different, but I mean, maybe hyperstructure is kind of a terminology for like autonomous worlds and other type of on-chain structures. It's kind of like an umbrella terminology, I feel. But yeah, autonomous worlds just kind of clicks, and I think it's just worth sharing that meme. So the terminology was originally kind of put forward by the Lattice team, who have been, these guys, some of them were the founders of Dark Forest, and they've been in this on-chain game space for longer than most. So and they share the same our philosophy around autonomous worlds are similar, so it's worth aligning.
This was they pulled together an essay, which is where they introduced the idea of autonomous worlds. I believe it's something they came up with themselves, and they proposed it in this essay, and just pulled out a couple of insights that they made. One is that worlds are containers for entities and the rules that govern them. And I think that this is something which is almost like philosophical, but they were thinking about it from a systematic mindset. But what they're saying here is that well, there's lots of different types of worlds, and they exist in various formats. So books, games, social groups, religions, and they run on different substrates. So from letters through to wikis. And what has the emergent world that we're building is on the blockchain substrate, which offers pretty unique properties. Blockchain worlds, which are on the blockchain substrate worlds, are really open. They're observable, and they avoid privileged gatekeepers. Now, if you go to their essay, they make a fantastic argument for this. They use different language. It's kind of a little bit more academic, and I won't try and emulate the full case they were making over a couple of bullet points. But effectively, humans conceptualize worlds. They have rules for entities within those worlds, and blockchains create this quite unique set of circumstances where everyone can build that world together without there being a gatekeeper. And so these are worlds which have a very high level of autonomy. So that's where building worlds on the blockchain substrate leads to the phrase autonomous worlds. And then Loaf made some observations, which we'll get onto in a second. But I think just to note that when we're talking about Realm's autonomous world, this is where we'll build the games. This is where Eternum will sit. Yeah. This is where Adventurers will sit.
Yeah, and it's actually a similar. We'll get into the actual structure, but it's exactly the same thing as what we were building originally in terms of like technology wise. This is just a bit more abstract, and it's a nicer way to build extensions and easier to build extensions, because I think what we discovered over the last year building and the hackathons and contributors and whatnot is that building games on-chain games is incredibly hard thing to do. It's the blending of lots of different technologies and lots of different understandings, and our goal, if our goal is to like maximize contributions and maximize extendability of the game, then the base level tools and the way people do it needs to be extremely simple and easy. And so that's the goal of what we're trying to do here. And it's led to go to the next slide now. Well, there's some more observations about autonomous worlds. So again, it's exactly what we've always been doing. Is that we talk about eternal games. Once these worlds are deployed, they live on the blockchain. They exist forever, and people can come and go. Developers can come and go, but the state will always persist. So we've already covered a bit of this, so I think we can just probably go on secretive.
I think I think just one of the other observations to make from a kind of marketing perspective is that when we are building out a category, we're building out a whole new category of gaming, to not have to do all the heavy lifting in terms of education by ourselves. So being able to use the same language set, so that when people are reading and understanding autonomous worlds, it's all being felt across the different ecosystems that are building similar projects.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. One observation is, loot was kind of like a proto-autonomous world. It kind of just was. It's not an on-chain game, but from a idea perspective, it really was. It was just an open IP that anyone could build upon. And there's like the loot autonomous world, so to speak, exists. It lives in us, it lives in all the other projects that are still within loot. And anyone can still come along and expand it. So yeah, there's definitely some parallels there. Just something to think about.
And then we get on to the technology and how we embraced the best tech or the optimal tech for building an autonomous world. So there you go, Liv.
Yeah, so autonomous worlds, they need to be extendable, they need to be understandable, and they need to be composable. And so this is the design framework we need to take into account when trying to build these things. And so we had a couple of these solved in the last technology stack, which we used, but there was some of it, there was definitely some blind spots, and the hackathon participants probably can speak to, I think also, Cairo, as a fairly immature language, also added a skill curve on top of that, which restricted some developers. So this is what we're trying to solve, and we have a solid solution. It's what we've been building for the last 4 months. So go to the next slide. So back in November, I think I woke up one day and I realized that our abstraction of building things, it just was not good enough. And this was definitely after reading the latest docs of how they abstracted their technology, which is a Solidity based system. And I just realized, like, if we want to build this massively expandable world, then we need a better base. And this is just, this is the nature of building things in public and, in the open, is that, you do run these idea mazes in public. And, software is always an evolution. And when you're building things that are, haven't been built before, sometimes you go down paths that, aren't optimal and you need to course correct. And it's just the nature of being in public that everyone gets to see how the sausage gets made, and that comes with its perks and it comes with its disadvantages. One being that everybody can see directions when they kind of when you go down directions that that don't pan out exactly how you thought they would. But that's fine. And so back in November, I started a group with a bunch of the other StarkNet kind of teams, builders like the cartridge guys, the bricks guys, topology guys, all the major builders in the space. And I just put forward a concept of building kind of a framework. I think it was called Dojo back then. That would just really make it easy for people to build these things using Cairo. And StarkNet has some of the best engineers like in the entire crypto ecosystem, and that's not an exaggeration. And so I thought, and a lot of the stuff that a lot of these teams are doing, like everyone's been rolling their own technology stacks, and that just comes with additional overhead that doesn't really need to be done, because the end user or end developer doesn't really want to have to relearn a bunch of technology every time they want to do something. And it also it means that everybody has to get their contracts audited, which is additional overhead. When ultimately what matters is the end user experience. 99% of people aren't going to worry about how a contract is built. But if we could share the same some of the same technology stack, then it would speed up, path to market. It would speed up auditing. Well, it would reduce the amount of code to audit because we can have the same code base audited across projects. So it led to the creation of Dojo, which is trying to solve this problem. And Dojo is just an open source project. Everything is just, you can find on GitHub. There's no token or anything. It's just purely an idea and a technology stack. That's it. Yeah, and so Dojo is a where do I need to go? If anyone's actually really curious and a developer, reach out to me and I can point you in the right direction to read about Dojo in the back end. But really, Dojo is just it's a set of tools, including like smart contracts, networking tools, indexing, and client libraries in order to build games like, what would normally take 2 months because you have to build everything from scratch should take a weekend. My ambition is to have developers go from like idea to game within 1 hour. Like that's the goal with Dojo. And so when Dojo is mature, which should be within the next like month or so, we will run like a hackathon and we will get people to use the Dojo stack, and I think we'll have amazing results from people using it. And so we are migrating, and like everybody that's used the client right now will realize like there's lags, there's it's definitely, it's not the experience that we want mainstream, and it never was going to be that anyway. And it's kind of carrying a lot of tech debt that we experimented with for the past 12 months. And that's the nature of software as well. Sometimes you just go down these paths, you build these things, and they kind of carrying legacy ideas from the past. And so and Cairo 1, which is the kind of new language that you write StarkNet contracts in, was released about 3 months ago, which is like a significantly better language to build things in and performance-wise. And so we were going to rewrite all our contracts anyway to Cairo 1, and so we are going to be migrating like our kind of current contracts to the Dojo stack, which is written in Cairo 1. So it was already kind of this like kind of migration was already in place. It's just we're kind of, this is the optimal time to do it, so that's why we're doing it. But a lot of the learnings from the client side, game loops, front end, is already established. So it's this migration, we've already begun it. And one thing to note is, the people that have played the alpha, you realize that there is some kind of latency between like transactions and whatnot. And so Dojo, the package, that's one of the trickiest parts with on-chain games, is because you're interacting with a blockchain that has like latency, and so from a user point of view, we're trying to like minimize that and make it feel like a real game. And that's like the trickiest part of this. And so the new stack will like when you do a new transaction, like when you do a transaction on the new client, it will look instantly. It'll look instant. Like transactions will be happening in the background, but it will look instant from like your player perspective. So it won't be this like weird like click 5 seconds then it updates. Or at this point, it's actually longer than that. It'll look instant, but in the back end, it will be processing that and doing anything in the background. And so that's one of the big learnings that we're applying to this new stack. Along with that, like where Amaro 337 and Rochelle are, everyone is down sweaty goblin mode, migrating to this new client stack. And one thing is to note, we were like the last couple of weeks where we thought we would try to get the current client build, working as expected with a couple of the new modules, which is the Bastions module, which we which is, I think there's a screenshot next of it. But we've decided in the last like 48 hours that like we're just going to focus all of our resources right now on building this new client out, because the longer we spend on the old client, the longer it's going to take to build this new client. So we're not going to push an update to this like the current client build, because it's just we just don't see any point in doing it. And we're kind of this new client that we're building is going to be significantly faster. It's going to have all the 3D elements that you've been seeing. It's just going to be 100 times better in every single way. So we're focusing all of our resources on that, and I think we will be able to have something to show for it within a couple of weeks, because it's it's clean. It doesn't have any tech debt from the past 12 months. And so yeah, I'm really excited about this. And everything that we're building now is like we're applying all the learnings of the abstraction of Dojo and like client libraries and whatnot. So it'll be extremely easy for people to come and mod these clients in the future. If anyone is a developer, you can look in their web client. I've actually made a proposal to build a I'm calling it Shogun UI, which is a it's a client it's a client framework for building autonomous world interfaces that will allow people to just chop and change like how the clients look. And by client, I just mean like the website and like the game visuals. So if you have like mild programming skills, you just need to know JavaScript, you could download the client and make some adjustments if you don't quite like how it works. But we're building in a way that to make that really extremely easy to do. Which is also, another like the aspiration of ours is that, we want many of these clients to exist in the future. It's not just one. And so we're going to build this framework to build these things, but anyone can choose to build their own client if they wish. So
yeah. I think just for the non-technical audience, there is. No, that's all right. For non-technical audience, the takeout is that we were already going to be rewriting the contracts, the smart contracts, to go from 0.1 to Cairo 1. So it's an opportune moment to include the Dojo tech stack, so it doesn't really set us back in any way. And that when we're referring to the client, we're talking about the actual, the game user interface. And what we're doing there is shifting from the one we've been building to a clean version which uses 3JS, which is a new type of technology, a new web. I don't know how new, pretty emerging web browser technology.
It's actually very mature. Like it's just a 3D library. It's if you've looked at the Influence game, which is another Starknet great on-chain game. They heavily use 3GS. We've kind of been using it in bits and pieces for the past like 12 months, but we're going heavily into it now. So yeah. So I mean, we just went over a lot of this stuff. So I mean, we just went over this for the last 5 minutes, so I don't think I need to touch on any more of this. I mean, one other thing to note is that like these worlds, since they do act like blockchains, Biblio, like we're deploying these first games into the world, but they're definitely not the only games that will exist, and that's like what we're trying to initialize. Well, yeah, it's what I tried to initialize with that forum post a couple days ago. I think one of the like a strength of a DAO over a central organization, and there's a lot of discussions around that, a lot of things that can be said around that, is that we do have these tokens that we can spray to developers to build within the world, and it's very difficult for a central organization to do that, but it's one of the benefits of that organization like Biblio has. And like if you take the long time horizon, yes, the Lords tokens, like it's a lot of Lords tokens, but like the the net value that we can get from doing these grants with the token to build within this world is immense. Like that's what will unlock ultimately the value of the token itself. Is the usage of it. And what better way to do that than by granting developers to build. Now, obviously, that comes with this nuance, meaning that we don't want to grant everything that is just everything under the sun. There needs to be like a structured approach to it. But I think it's definitely worth a lot of discussion. And a deep framework is put into place to allow this to happen. So if you do have thoughts on this, drop into the forum post. If you agree or disagree or have any ideas around it. Just let's discuss this and put a structure into place. So within a month we can have something that potentially maybe it's like maintained by a council of 10 members, and there's a mandate and a structure around it, and they can just execute on grants. I think the ideal team for this is not the kind of the developers that are building this right now. It'd be community members that are willing to give up a small amount of their time to be on the council of this. I definitely I don't think I should be on the council for this. It should be a independent thing from the current team. So, but yeah, just get in discussion.
So something to add to this is that the games can be a hits-driven business, and so if you look at the successful, from the Web 2 space, the games that do well, or rather the gaming companies that do well, what they try and do is create an ecosystem where they make it very easy for developers to come along and develop. They take care of as much of the business as possible, so that the creativity of the game designers is allowed to show through, and they're not worrying so much about the infrastructure. I think that's kind of what this would be doing. It'd be, rather than us as a DAO trying to make hits, we allow other game designers to iterate quickly, mix and match game mechanics from, it's an open source world, mix and match game mechanics to create something, iterate easily, put it out there, and the things that are successful, they become forked, and people will start to develop on those. So it's the developers that create the experiences that bring players to an ecosystem. So it might seem like diluting the tokens, but equally, it's how you create that ecosystem where there are lots of experiences that players actually want in the first place.
Exactly. We went through this. Oh yeah, all right. Well, we made it.
We could do tab on one slide and just show the sneak peek of Bastions. Go on.
So this is the Fermentador has designed a it's a very cool kind of it's not quite RTS, but it's a very strategic Fermentador. You can drop in and give it a minute pitch if you like, or what Bastions is. But this is a 3JS model of the like how the interface is going to look. This isn't exactly what it's going to look like, but this is kind of the structure. Yeah.
Bastions are just a system made for multiple player battles, right? Multiple player PvP, where you have around orders, where you have several orders battling for one bastion. When they have the control of this bastion, they can gain specific bonus, right? There will be several types of bastions, so give several types of bonus. And how the battle works is that you have 11 different locations, right? And you have to move your armies around those locations, so you can hold and attack and control these different locations to gain control of the bastion. So yeah, that's the basic pitch, and we are really excited to introduce, because we think that's a really new experience, right, for Eternum players, and will involve a lot of coordination and talking, and bring all not only strategy and planning, but bring a lot of a social aspect to it that's missing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's so you fight over these things with other orders, and if you capture them, then the whole order gets a bonus. That's the gameplay. So, and there could be hundreds of armies in these things fighting over the Bastion.
Okay, shall we? We're on time, which is good. So 5 minutes late. So the Q&A. Does anyone want to put their hand up or just unmute themselves and ask a question? Palamato has asked one in the chat, which is okay to interact with deployed contracts now or still wait?
I think it's this is what I kind of wrestled this for the last week, thinking like let's maintain the current alpha, and at the same time, but kind of clicked in the last 48 hours that like there's going to be bugs in that client, and I just don't think it's even worth us like spending the dev time and the resources trying to maintain it if we're not going to be using it much. So I don't think it's not worth interacting. I mean, you can. I mean, it's going to exist there, so you can play around if you like. But we're not going to be maintaining and fixing bugs on it. Just because it's just taking too much. Things development time always takes longer than expected. I thought, we would have been complete, but things pop up, and it's just complex systems. So yeah, I probably suggest not. But you always could if you want. But yeah.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
Want to drop a question in the sidebar? Neotin's is typing something. He's going for a long question, perhaps.
Can we get an update on something maybe like Adventurers or Survivor?
Yeah, so Survivors, we didn't cover any update on that. But if you look in the channel, I believe is Spaghetti on Toast here, and does Dev? Oh, they are here. So those guys and lady, and hello. So yeah, I think, I mean, you can probably speak to this, Spaghetti, but I think we're close to like some experimental phase in the client for this.
Yeah, so it's coming together quite nicely. Just trying to put it in a nice React app. We had it running through a CLI, so you could do it through the client. Then created a GUI to make that a bit better, and now we're moving to a React app. But it's going well. It's just taking a bit of time to pull everything together. We've had to create a new indexer. So looking forward to getting something out hopefully next week, by the end of next week, for you guys to test and to play.
Yeah, nice. And so yeah, so Survivors is really like kind of an exploration into. It's kind of like a PvE/PvP mini game that uses a lot of the loot items and has some interesting mechanics about how far you can get into the game. Yeah, and in terms of the adventurous stuff, I mean, it goes back to what we were saying before about this whole ECS system, like where it, like where I like the core focus, like the first release needs to be Eternum, so that's what we're focused on shipping. Loot Survivors is kind of like a mini adventurers game, but it's not like the final adventurers kind of stack. That will come after Eternum.
Maybe speak to how the Adventurers sits in this concept of a realm's autonomous world.
Okay.
High level.
Yeah, so Adventurers is like so Eternum is basically a bunch of mechanics built around the realms and built around trading of the resources, and fighting over realms and fighting over bastions. Adventures will be a set of tools. So it'll have it like it'll be a set of tools, and like these, by tools I mean like deployed contracts, like systems, and that developers can kind of mix and match to build experiences with. And we will build like the first couple of experiences using those tools, but the tools will be open for people to build upon. But a lot of the systems that like exist, so like one of the interesting properties of this new stack is this idea of like reusing contracts across like multiple potentially hundreds of games, and like one of them is like a position component, for example. So like the whole realms world, right? Like this is the digital physics is like one. It's like one big plane, like XY coordinate, right? And so like you exist on that plane somewhere. And like the realms exist somewhere, and adventurers will exist somewhere, but they still share the same like substrate and the same components to coordinate where that position exists in the world. So yeah, there's a lot of overlap. What I was saying before about like developer overhead and whatnot. Like this isn't just like developer overhead for new developers. This is actually developer overhead for like current developers. This new system abstracts like a lot of the complexity away from like our development speed, like what we're building right now. So it'll make us iterate significantly faster. Yeah.
And ultimately, Adventurers will be a kind of marketplace. So if you're a creator, you can come along, and there's an addressable audience. There's the infrastructure and primitives for you to build a game, maybe put a bounty out on the creation of the user interface that goes with it, the client that goes with it, and then once that's kind of on the store, anyone can kind of interact with it. So that it's kind of creating our own on-chain gaming marketplace and creator ecosystem. Any further questions? Just drop them into the side chat or unmute. I'm not actually sure who it was that asked that question. I missed.
That was Raul. Sorry about that. Could I follow up?
Yeah, go ahead. Man.
Yeah, man. I'm very curious about what's going on here. So one thing that I'm curious about is you guys mentioned it a little bit, but could you give maybe some more specifics on how you guys have been cooperating with other StarkNet projects, and kind of what ideas are you sharing? What have you taken from other projects, and what are other projects taking from us?
Sure. So I mean, Dojo was like incepted. Like, do you mean from like a technology point of view?
Yeah, go ham.
Yeah. Well, from a technology point of view, like, I mean, it's all collaborative at this point. Like, everyone's code is open source, so everyone's learning from one another as we're building this stuff. Dojo is kind of the amalgamation of all of our lessons and a lot of other projects' lessons to build a consistent technology stack to allow these things to be built easily. So, all the best builders in that are contributing to it to, turn it into the best stack that's possible. So we're contributing to it. Other projects are contributing to it, and whatnot. But it's just like a stack. It doesn't have any like specific business logic around it. It's just a kind of it's like it's like StarkNet itself, right? Like we don't build StarkNet, we build on StarkNet. Dojo is just this bunch of tools to allow you to build experiences easier. Did that answer?
The dope. I think maybe the dope world example would be a good example to talk about what the guys that are using Dojo over in Dope World to do.
Yeah. So the Dope Wars guys, they're also building on Dojo to build their on-chain games as well. So yeah, I mean, one of the big benefits is we were gonna put a big chunk aside to audit these contracts, but if we're using the Dojo stack, then those contracts will be audited by the best auditors, and then just you can trust that they're secure. As some of this like shared engineering overhead that really benefits every project. It's like you don't have to recreate all the same tools. You just use the best set of tools, and everyone can contribute to make them better, and everyone can focus on what makes themselves different, which is like the core gameplay. It's not the like infrastructure. No one sees the infrastructure. You just want to use the best infrastructure. You don't need to build your own bespoke. And since we've been building everything in the open anyway, a lot of people have taken been inspired by what we've done in the last 12 months to build their things as well. So it's at a kind of a developer level. Everyone shares a lot of everything that open source. Everybody shares everything. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, that's I guess building on Starknet, but have we really seen anybody building on Realms stuff yet, or is that still very just core team working on those contracts?
Well, they weren't really complete. I mean, we had the hackathon where about 8 teams built potential modules. That was about 5 months ago. But yeah, as I said before, it's hard to build on something that's immature. So the hope with this like stack is that it makes it extremely easy to do it. And yeah, I'll release a whole bunch of I'll do like videos on how to build extensions. Because I know it's a pretty of a steep learning curve to build these things. Like it's not like you need to understand smart contracts. You need to understand like every part of the stack to build these things. So yeah, it's not easy. But I think we're definitely like in terms of this whole idea around autonomous worlds and like permissionless games, we're at the peak of the pack.
Anybody else, or we'll stick to our intention to rounding off in about 45 minutes, which is pretty close to doing.
And of course, the banners guys are there's a proposal to build the banners extension, which will be built into the Dojo world too. So there's that's probably going to be one of the first additional modules to be built within the world.
There's been lots of people who have at earlier stages from the hackathon have spec'd out things, but it's just difficult to, we were using Cairo 0.1, and it's difficult for them to be able to. It's like trying to hit a moving target, I guess. But now we can re-engage all of the builders who have attracted. We've got a good ecosystem and good connections across .NET in terms of the builders from things like working with them on Dojo, but also the hackathons. And those are the people we'll go straight back to when we've got a much less friction, like a much easier engine and tech stack for people to use. We know there's plenty of people who are interested, so we can just make, the intention is to make it as easy for them to build as possible.
Exactly.
Wonderful. Well, yeah, I think we probably wrap it up there. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Wonderful to see a mixture of faces recognized and new. So welcome. And thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.